Thank you. We can turn in our Bibles to the prophecy of Isaiah and in chapter 40. Isaiah chapter 40, we can take up the reading at verse 25. To whom then will you liken me, or shall I be equal, saith the Holy One? Lift up your eyes on high, and behold, who hath created these things, that bringeth out their host by number. He calleth them all by names, by the greatness of his might, for that he is strong in power, not one faileth. Why sayest thou, O Jacob, and speakest, O Israel, my way is hid from the Lord, and my judgment is passed over from my God? Hast thou not known? Hast thou not heard? That the everlasting God, the Lord, the Creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary. There is no searching of his understanding. He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might he increaseth strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. May God bless that reading to us. If we are spared next week, it will be 1 year since these online prayer meetings began. And it's safe to say that none of us imagined that these meetings would have become so popular and have such longevity. In fact, they have become an oasis for many of us in a world increasingly hostile to God. Yet these meetings are also a reminder that we as Christians are struggling to cope with issues which continue to weigh heavily upon us. For the past 12 months, we have heard some of the most urgent public prayers many of us have ever heard. We have listened to groans and sighs of praying men as they petitioned God in heaven to come to our aid. Our prayer burdens have included serious concerns over issues connected with the coronavirus pandemic, closures and restrictions imposed upon the church, the state of the Christian church locally, nationally, and internationally, the growing opposition to biblical values by political and social engineers. Also, we have become increasingly aware of our own spiritual poverty, the coldness and hardness that is reflected in how little we mourn over our own sin, as well as the shallowness of our personal repentance. So here we are, 12 months since we first began circling the walls of this particular Jericho, and there's not a crack to be seen. It is so tempting to ask with the psalmist, how long wilt thou forget me, Lord? How long wilt thou hide thy face from me? But of course, God never forgets his own people. Neither is he ever unaware of their plight in this world, nor is he ever deaf to their prayers and supplications. In the context of our reading, Isaiah had just warned Israel of the Babylonian captivity. You'll see a reference to that in the previous chapter in verse 6. And so immediately he seeks to encourage the people with his famous exhortation in verse 1 of this chapter. Comfort ye, my people, saith your God. In our present situation, bereft of any immediate answer to our prayers, we need the comfort that only God can give. There are 3 particular aspects of that comfort worth noting in this chapter. Number 1, the prediction on the forerunner, John Baptist, who would herald the arrival of Messiah in verses 2 to 11. Number 2, the power and wisdom of God in governing the world, verses 12 to 17. And number 3, the awesome sovereignty of the Creator, Sustainer God, in verses 18 to 28. As we wait upon our God to answer our prayers, we too must remember that God remains in total control of this world and all its inhabitants. And in every moment of each day, He is working out His divine purpose for humanity. Nothing happens by chance. Nothing can ever be omitted from nor added to what He has decreed. And that includes the appearance of the tiniest virus to the interference of political leaders in the business of His church on earth. But let's not lose sight of God's sovereign credentials here. Verse 26, lift up your eyes on high, and behold who hath created these things, that bringeth out their host by number. He calleth them all by names, by the greatness of his might, for that he is strong in power. Verse 28, hast thou not known, hast thou not heard, that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary. Verse 29, he giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might he increaseth strength. This is the God whose name we invoke here every Monday evening. So as we struggle to understand the outworking of his purpose in our lives, we can only continue crying out to him in prayer. Jesus taught what he called the prayer of importunity. In other words, being bold and persistent when asking God for significant answers and blessing. And there's a fine example of this in Genesis 32, with Jacob wrestling with the angel at Penuel. I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. Is that not what we have been saying to God for the past 12 months? It's this type of prayer that's being alluded to here in the closing verse of Isaiah 40. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Prayer is implied in that waiting. There can be no sincere waiting upon God without persistent prayer. And in our spiritual weariness these days, daily being bombarded by the politics of fear, compelled to watch the gross iniquity of close contact sport being played freely whilst congregations are forbidden to fellowship, having our Christian values swept aside as collateral damage in the war against COVID. We need to be reminded of the reward promised to those who wait upon God in prayer. So notice something very significant in the pattern set out in verse 31. In the natural realm, when this type of pattern is considered, the movement goes from the lesser to the greater. As, for example, when someone is recovering from illness or someone training for excellence on the sports field, they become more and more healthy, or they become more and more physically fit. It's an upwards trajectory. Not so for those willing to wait upon the Lord in prayer. As John Baptist said, he must increase, and I must decrease. So it begins here with the promise, they shall renew their strength. And we remember how Paul defined Christian strength in 2 Corinthians 12:10. When I am weak, then am I strong. To the world, that's nonsense. It's a contradiction in terms. Whereas the Christian comes to know exactly what Paul meant. Made strong with strength not our own. The next stage is that they shall mount up with wings as eagles. Here's what it feels like when we first experience God's rich blessing in our heart and soul. And that feeling is replicated when God blesses us in particular ways and enriches our lives. Is this not the metaphor used when Israel was delivered from Egypt? Exodus 19, verse 4. I bare you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself. But then, unexpectedly, there is a decline in the trajectory. They shall mount up with wings as eagles, and they shall run and not be weary. They have gone from flying like an eagle to merely running like an athlete. To the newly converted person, everything is new and exciting and adventurous, like flying high. Yet the day must come when chastisement and temptations and trials and tribulations become burdensome. And though that may slow the Christian down, grace still makes him or her a conqueror and an overcomer. But then the trajectory declines further still. They shall walk and not faint. So we go from flying high like an eagle to running without being weary, to now walking without fainting. And here, I suspect, is where many of us are at today. Our days of flying high like an eagle are over. Our days of running without fainting are fast becoming a twilight. Now we wait upon our God in these dark and difficult days. We can only walk, but we will not faint. Here's a picture of the mature Christian, contemplating the mystery of God's providence, meditating over his next move among us as a generation, anticipating a global revival without which there can be no hope for our nations. Meanwhile, our walk in this world may seem somewhat ponderous to ourselves and to others. But however long we have to wait upon God, we will not faint in our walk. We know that He knows the end from a beginning. Our present circumstances may seem chaotic and despairing to us. However, God can change the darkest day into glorious light. So let's continue in our prayer of importunity. Let's not be ashamed to be beggars at the throne of grace. Remember, He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might, He increaseth strength. Amen, and may God bless those thoughts to us.